This is Q&A. The ball's in your court.
How does one feel accomplished? At the end, let's say when Yeshiva would do the learning, the Gemara, the Chumash, how does one feel like they've accomplished something at the end of every day when they go to sleep? You only learn like a small portion, and how does one feel accomplished at the end of the day?
How does one feel accomplished at the end of the day? It's a very good question, and I think that you need different strategies over different spans of time. To start with a longer span of time, I recommend keeping a diary. And it doesn't have to be very detailed, but I learned this, or I had this question, or I was struggling with that. I can guarantee you, if a year later you go back and read what you wrote a year before, you'll be astonished. Because you forget what you've been through. You're so involved in the everyday challenges that you forget where you've been. And it's very much like if you've set yourself to climb a substantial mountain, and there are foothills, so you go up a foothill, you go down a valley, you go up to the next foothill, you go down a valley. And of course, you're looking up at the top of the mountain, and the closer you get, the further back you have to tilt your head to see the top of the mountain. But if you turn around and look behind to see how much ground you've covered, then you have an indicator of where you've been and what you've done. Now, at the end of a particular day, then the challenge is not to calculate how many new units of information you've picked up, but how well did you do in paying attention? How much time did you manage to focus rather than waste? Keep track of that and see whether you can say, well, today I was 80% focused and that's a good day. Instead of calculating how much you learned. Indeed, one of the problems with calculating how much you learned is that tomorrow you might have to unlearn some of the things you learned today. So, there won't be a net plus always. Sometimes there'll be, a net plus in your performance and in your understanding, but not in the net amount of information you have control over. So I think that measuring the challenges in terms of your faithfulness to the project is something which could help you feel an accomplishment. Yeah.
How does one know when to navigate, how to explain to their non-Jewish or secular family, why you do certain things, and Shomer Gia, what if you have non-Jewish family, who to if you're able to still hug them, or what kinds of things about what to say, explain why you don't eat out anymore with them, or if you have non-Jewish friends from your youth, if you're trying to...
Okay, explaining what you're doing to people who are close to you. Now, first of all, you have to avoid, like the plague, the crusade. I'm going to make them all from. God will be very proud of me. Don't do that. Avoid that. When facing challenges, slough it off. Don't look for that kind of confrontation. But when you are, when you're dealing with a practical situation, you go home for vacation, there are going to be activities and so forth and so on. Of course, the way you describe something, explain something to somebody depends upon the somebody. It depends on what he can hear, depends upon what his tolerance is, depends upon what his openness is. One way to help explaining things in a way to avoid confrontation is to reduce your responsibility and reduce the strength of your claim. If you come home and say, well, lucky me, I found the truth, capital T, and then you're taking on a real challenge. But if you say, I'm involved in this particular way of living, and I'm experimenting. I'm 22. I'm experimenting. Isn't that the right thing to do at 22? And so far, I'm finding it interesting and challenging. So, at this point in my experience, this is what I'm doing. Then you're not challenging them. You're not telling them that they have to be like you. You're not saying you're superior to them in any way. You're exploring something. And the thing that I'm exploring is something for which consistency is very important. Now, having said that, I believe you should make every effort to not only be willing to share with them what you can, but to offer to engage with them in activities before you grudgingly decide to pander to their low tastes, but offer to them the things that I've become fascinated in the mountain climbing or the rock surfaces. There was a photographer who specialized in the rock surfaces of the desert. And, if you're in Los Angeles, there's a lot of desert around. You say, this is what I'd love to go and observe these things at at twilight or at sunrise, in between dawn and sunrise, when the light is soft. These are things that are interesting to many people, or wildlife. And you could offer to do that with them, which would be something which, when I first came here about 103 years ago, there was a boy from South Carolina, and he had become religious. His parents were not religious at all, and he's going home for the summer. And he asked me for some advice. I said, "What does your father like to do?" He says, "Well, he likes to play golf." I said, "Offer to play golf with him. Don't wait for him to offer, and then use it as a point against him. Offer to play golf with him." Rabbi, hitting a ball into a hole with a stick, to spend 3 hours doing that? I said, "Trust me." Offer. Came back. He offered to play twice with his father, and he played. And before he left, his father said to him, "I respect you." Because instead of setting up the conflict and setting up the contrast and the superior, inferior, and all the rest of it, he reached out to his father and he said, "I want to share with you. I want to do something that we'll both enjoy. I want to be together with you doing something we both enjoy." That's gold for a parent. And then you build a kind of confidence. Well, you're not out to show how superior you are, you're not out to get them, not out to prove that they cheated you in your childhood. You want to be a child and enjoy things together with your parents. Here's another example. Typical letter home. You'll never guess what I learned this week. A tremendously fascinating idea. This and this idea, and it has these applications, and the Greeks said that, and the Romans said that, and the Torah said that. Love, Richard. But do the people you're writing to have lives? You have no interest in them? Well, but they're doing everything they do every year. It's the same thing, same humdrum, boring, insignificant, valueless thing. I'm doing something important. I'm learning God's law and stuff. Just project that attitude and see how far you get. So these are things that you can and show an interest. So you spent the last 3 months in India. How was it? Where did you go? What did you learn? Do I care about what that person did in India? Not really, but I care about the person. And I care about my relationship with the person. So it isn't a lie. Try to set up that kind of mutually respectful and, I would say, friendly interaction, and it will save you a lot of grief. And then, by the way, and this includes spending Shabbos at home, even though they don't keep Shabbos. Now, they may leave you. They may go out in the car for a drive and leave you at home, but they left you. You didn't leave them. You didn't send a message, because I'm religious now, Saturdays are off limits, I can't spend them with you. You didn't send that message. You sent the message, I'm here. I have time, and I'm happy to share the time with you. There's certain things I can't do, but I'm happy to be here with you. I'm not running away from you. And then when push comes to shove, and there are certain things that you can't do, you say, listen, you know that I love spending time with you. You know we did X, Y, Z together. This I can't do. This I can't do. At least where I am now, in terms of what I'm living now, I cannot do this now. I apologize. If you need to do this, have a wonderful time. You can tell me about it when you get back. And if not, then let's do something together that I can do. So there will be rough spots. You can't avoid all friction. But you can minimize it, and you can accompany it with enough positive feeling that you can make a success out of it. How do I know this? Because when I became religious, it was terrible. I had a horrible relationship with my parents until I got married. My first wife negotiated it, and I ended up with a very good relationship with them because she was much smarter than I was, and she taught me some of these things. So, I guess one of your solutions would be to get married, but that may not be practical right away. Ja, was noch? What else is on people's minds? Yeah.
In terms of how should one prioritize learning the language of the Torah and the Gemara to just reading an art scroll and actually, getting all the information that way?
It's very, very important. The purpose of education, let's say when you're involved most of the time, full time in education, there are two purposes. Maybe other people divide it up differently. I'm not speaking like a prophet here, but this is the way I look at it. One is to gather information, and the other is to acquire new educational capabilities. You can learn the size of all the buildings in the world. You can also learn how to calculate, solve differential equations and calculate it on the basis of certain basic facts. The one is information, the other is a capability. Now, learning new educational abilities is hard. It's a significant step forward. And usually you accomplish that when you're able to invest a significant amount of concentrated time in picking up those capabilities. Acquiring information is something you do your whole lifetime. But when you're in an educational institution, investing in new abilities will multiply the amount of information that you'll gather throughout your lifetime. So a significant amount of the time should be invested in acquiring those new capabilities, as opposed to just acquiring information. Having some grasp of the Hebrew language is definitely a major, major contribution to your ability to learn in a significant fashion for the rest of your life. I struggled for years to try to get a Hebrew requirement for the yeshiva before you could go on to certain types of advanced study, and I was uniformly unsuccessful. I still think that it's a mistake. I think that, because I know from my own experience, I'm very poor at languages. And when I first went to yeshiva in Merkaz Rav Kook, 1964, count on your fingers and toes how many years ago that was. And they had a program for Americans, it was run by the Sachnut, the Jewish agency. There were 11 of us, if I remember correctly, and the program was all in Hebrew. None of us spoke Hebrew. Didn't matter. We didn't even room together. We roomed with Israelis. All the classes were in just Hebrew, and it was sink or swim. Either you get it or you don't. There was no translation, no quarters, they say. And for me, it was gold. Within 3 months, I was speaking the language. And from then on, I joined these Israelis in their shir. It was magnificent. For me, to sit down with a book and learn the grammar and the vocabulary and the constructions and everything else would have been murder. So I know that investing in Hebrew is a very big investment. There is a book, now I think the name of the grammar book that they used in this institution, maybe in certain places of these, they use it called Hayesod, which means the foundation. Basic roots and 5 out of the 7 constructions and how you make nouns out of things. So when you pick up a siddur and you start to daven, when you pick up a chumash and you start to learn the parsha, and it helps with Gemara, though Gemara is largely Aramaic, but they're cognate languages. So you get to the point where you're able to learn the material in the original. Number one, it's in the original. All translation is compromised. And second of all, once you have the language to a certain extent, then, you see, when you come to new material, your mind can hold just so much new information. After that, you have to calculate if this means this and that means that, and what's the question, and how's this an answer, and so on and so on. And if you can be overwhelmed by the information, you can't calculate it at all. And your mind comes to a standstill. So having this advantage that you have some grasp of the language, so that you can take for granted, and then open your mind to trying to understand it, is a tremendous advantage. So that's one thing about the Hebrew language, and Gemara is the hardest thing you'll ever study. And the more experience you can have in studying Gemara, more facility you pick up in being able to study Gemara, the better off you'll be. Now that facility is enhanced by both scope and depth. And that's why, if you have enough time and you have the patience and the focus, you have usually two different Gemara study sessions a day. One is called Bikiyas, and one is called Iyun. One where you take things apart in great detail, and you work out the arguments in detail patiently, and you think about this problem and that problem, and this proof and that proof. And the other where you just read. You read quickly, and you try to translate, and then you go page after page after page. You may not even review even once, or if you review once, and you hope to cover ground. That way, you see a tremendous variety of circumstances in the Gemara, different types of arguments, different types of proofs, different types of conversations between speakers, different levels in the layers of information and authority in the Gemara. You get a lot of background from doing the two of them. So that's where you're going to pick up abilities. And of course, if you're about Shiva, as you go through the year, the holidays that are coming, you have to study the Parsha. You should know basic understanding what the Siddur says. You should know these are pieces of information that you need just to live competently and be able to be part of the conversation with other people. And both of them are important. The balance for each person is going to be different. The relative amount and what you focus on is going to be different for each. But this is an outline of orientation. Yeah.
What would you say to like Baal Tshuva guys who want to get married but feel like they don't compare it to guys that are raised like from birth, like they have a lot of catch up to do and not a lot of time? Like, what should people focus on if they want to get married?
Well, I don't think you should think in terms of catching up. I think that's impractical, and it's going to fail, and it's going to lead to depression. It's not a worthwhile thing. I think you have to be the best person that you can be, and part of this is your general orientation. I remember when the editor of the Jerusalem Post, this was a reporter for the New York Times, came down. This was like 35 years ago. And Rav Nata Schiller was the main person that the reporter was talking to, but several of us were there. And the reporter asked Rav Schiller, would you describe yourselves as born-again Jews? And he said, absolutely not. Born-again means I'm starting my life over. We don't believe in that. We believe you continue your life. Now, you may continue it with revised priorities, and you maybe continue it in a somewhat different direction, but you graft the new onto the old. And the deep philosophical or religious idea is God doesn't make mistakes. And if he started you out this way, you didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose what century or what city to be born into. You didn't choose your circumstances. So if he started you out this way, this is the foundation on which he wanted you to build your life. Not to turn your back on it, regret that you did it. You're changing your life at 22 and wished you had done it at 16 and go through life with a grudge against God that he didn't give you a better start. That's not our view of things. So you want to make the best out of what you could be. Now, one element in that is the following bitter reflection, which I offer to you. First, picture the kind of woman that you would like to marry. What would you like her ideals to be, and her goals to be, and her feelings about material possessions and all the rest. And then, when you've got a pretty good picture of the woman you would like to marry, then ask yourself, what kind of man does she want to marry? What will she be looking for? Does that describe me? Probably not. And then figure out, what do I have to do to become the kind of man that the kind of woman I'm looking for would be looking for and want to marry? And that may give you some guidance as to what to do with the next couple of years. In particular, a woman who's idealistic and who's willing to sacrifice and wants to have a solid Torah home wants a husband who knows something. Not just a nice guy. Being a nice guy is very important. Not just a nice guy. She wants someone she can look up to and who your joint children can look up to as someone who knows something and someone who can give informed guidance to the way in which the family should develop. So investing in being that kind of person is a worthwhile investment in terms of preparation for marriage. There are other things. I have shiurim on marriage and dating and love and marriage, things like that, and there's a lot of literature on it. Things that, if you are getting close to that part of that next challenge of life, be worthwhile thinking about, talking to people about. There's a lot of wisdom there that could help you not only make the right choice, but to make the choice right after you've made the choice, which is at least as important.
I'm not religious. Is there, and I really enjoy the way I live life. Are there reasons why I should maybe become religious?
I don't think I got all the words. Start again. What did you say?
So I'm not religious at the moment, and I like the way I live life. I enjoy it.
You like the?
I like how I live my life.
How you live your? Oh, I see.
Yeah. Are there reasons that I should become religious and change the way I live my life?
Well, first of all, how much do you know about the way religious people live their lives?
I grew up in a religious household and I went to a Jewish day school.
In what city?
So I know a fair amount.
In what city?
Philadelphia.
Well, there are a few things that I could offer for you to think about. You're probably aware of the statistics of family breakdown, individual breakdown in the religious community vis-a-vis the general community. And you're probably aware that most people's attitude is, yeah, I know this sort of thing happens, but it's not going to happen to me. And you're probably aware that that's a fallacy, because all the ones to whom it happened also said it's probably not going to happen to me. And it did happen. So if part of your comfort in the way you're living your life is based on that kind of self-deception, then I think you should think again and maybe worry a little bit. The people, let's say, in universities who do drugs, they're not going to be addicted. Of course not. There are addicts, but not me. And then they happen to end up addicted. So it's a very common self-deception. And when you know the statistics of divorce and violence and drug addiction and suicide and all the rest and depression are considerably superior in the religious community, you have to be self-critical of your comfort zone and make sure that it's not based on simply this kind of self-deception, which goes together with a certain social milieu. I don't know if you're in university, but university is a studied, designed, and practiced environment of irresponsibility. Nothing really matters. Don't tell me you're taking courses. I taught university for 10 years. I know what you're taking, and I know what you're studying, and I know your 22 weeks a year vacation in your serious lifestyle. Nothing really counts on you. Nothing really depends upon you. It's a cocoon. It's a false cocoon. And that can lead you to all sorts of distortions in terms of what it is you're doing, what it is that you want to do. There's another just associated piece of life wisdom, but I saw this with my students. There are certain subjects which people enjoy studying, and they don't realize that practicing them as a profession is a lot different from studying them. And the number of students who say, I loved studying it in university, but when I came out to the work world, I actually had to do it. It was murder. I didn't want to live like that because you didn't check out what it is to work in it that way. I myself was very naive and idealistic about university. And when I faced the amount of corruption that there is taken for granted in university, and it's much worse today than it used to be in my time, much worse. So it was bitterly disappointing. I'm thinking of the Greek Academy, and the amount of lying and cheating and misrepresentation and all the rest, let alone plagiarism and DEI appointments and all the rest. The question is whether the contentment that you see is contentment that's based on not thorough and objective reckoning with the facts and the probabilities and the possibilities. Obviously, I don't know you. I had a correspondence 20 years ago with a fellow who was doing his PhD at Oxford in philosophy, and that's my field. And he said to me, I grew up in a religious home, and I'm not now religious, and I know that I have issues. But I hope you'll correspond with me anyway. So I thought, okay, this guy knows he has issues. So that's a big step. He's not pretending he's objective, and he's not pretending that he's got the truth, and he wants to have correspondence. And I did, and it lasted maybe 18 months or 2 years, and the correspondence started. Here are the reasons why the Jewish religion is wrong. This, and this. So I answered those questions, and after a couple of months went by, okay, let's see how you would answer this. This seems to me to be a significant objection. Okay, a couple of months went by. I'm wondering how you would respond to this kind of question. Okay, a few more months went by. He said, well, maybe the following could be something that needs to be explored. He became more and more tentative, much less doctrinaire, much less aggressive, and eventually the correspondence petered out. I didn't get a final answer from him or what happened to him, but the evolution of his attitude and thinking over the period of time was really quite striking. And since he was at Oxford, he wasn't really dumb. So I thought, okay, I took him on. He was honest, and he put himself on the line, and he was open to change and to have that happen. You've had more experience than most. The only other thing that I can think of saying to you now, and of course I don't know how compressed in time it is, but several times in my life I've met people who said, you can't, Rabbi, I know about Shabbos and I know about studying Torah and all the rest of it. I grew up in a religious household, a religious community. I know all about that. How old are you? 45. When did you stop your observance? When I was 19. I was a sophomore in college, and that's when I stopped. Okay. And now you're 45. Are you a professional? Yeah, I have a master's degree or maybe even a PhD, and I'm working in this profession. I want to ask you a question. You're working in economics. I have a cousin who's 20 years old. He's a college junior. He's majoring in economics. He has theories. His theories about economics. Maybe you should talk to him. He's a bright guy. The guy always says, Rabbi, I'm 45, I have an advanced degree. I've been working in the field for 30 years. I'm going to talk to a 20-year-old? Why would I do that? I said, okay, fine. And now, you're 45, and you're still living with your 19-year-old decision to stop your religious practice? Why are you still listening to your former 19-year-old self? Did you investigate in the last 30 years any of these issues anymore? Don't you know that there are people with PhDs in every academic subject who are from? You don't know that? They're probably as smart as you are. And they know a lot more about a lot of things than you do, because you have people with 20 different PhDs and you only have one. Maybe at the age of 45, the question should be reopened with your superior age and maturity and wisdom and life experience, and maybe you'll see things differently from the way you saw them when you were 19. There's a big frum world out there, and there are a lot of people who know a lot of things. I don't know what pushed you, I don't know what your life experience is, but there are a lot of people who came through traumatic circumstances, and a lot of people who came simply out of a sense that there's more to the world than I'm being told. That there's more to the world than I've been able to discover. And I want to see what the rest of it is and see how it fits in. And these people are, many of them, gifted people. I mean, one of my close friends with whom I've been studying more or less regularly for it's almost 60 years, has a PhD from MIT in science. He's a bright guy. And he didn't grow up in a religious household. And he has a beautiful family, and children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and we live together every day. And he's really smart. So there are a lot of people out there from whom perhaps additional perspective could be gained. The other person who also has a PhD from MIT is Rabbi Meiselman, who is a Rosh Yeshiva, and he was a professor of mathematics, and he put out about 5 years ago a classic called Torah, Chazal, and Science, which is only 900 pages long, reviewing myriads of subjects in the original and with the commentaries and all the rest, and someone who has a PhD in mathematics from MIT, so he knows the science, he knows it well. So there are a lot of really gifted people out there. Maybe there's something, some stones still unopened that would give you a different perspective on the choices that you're making.
Just curious, how does one develop better critical thinking ability to respond to tough questions quicker? Like sometimes after an hour after a conversation, I'm like, man, I should have said that. Why didn't I say that? Like I know the information, but sometimes bringing it up in the moment is hard. I'm wondering if you have any tips for that.
So look, I wouldn't necessarily think of that as a very important ability. Yeah, you want to sparkle at the cocktail party. That's not really a very important life skill to get it right away, so you can, be sharp in the conversation. If you get an hour later and you realize something there that you didn't see before, and now you can think about it, you've got something with which you can build a foundation for real understanding. And whether you get it right away or don't get it right away, and the desire to get it right away often drives a person into superficiality. He's looking for the quick punch. He's not looking for the real point. In fact, when you're having important conversations, my suggestion, and I've heard from other people as well, is to slow it down. Do it by email. Don't do it on the phone. Because on the phone, you've got to answer right away. Better to do it by email, read it, and then come back an hour later and read it, and then maybe look it up a little bit and see what other people say about it before you answer, so that you give a considered answer rather than an off-the-cuff answer. I don't think you should think of that as a crucial skill. I think it's helpful sometimes in some circumstances, but it's not nearly as important as thinking it through several times, holding on to questions. I held on to questions for decades. I had pretty solid objections against Jewish sources, and I held on to them for decades. Of course, I got a lot of answers, otherwise I wouldn't have made it in, but a lot of them I didn't get answers to, and then I found answers 2 decades later, 3 decades later, and I was very grateful that Kosh Baruch Hu gave me a character where I hold on to things. I don't let them go. Critical thinking in general, I think, is a myth. There's no such thing as critical thinking. Different disciplines have different methods and different skills. And people who say, well, I just want to be more logical. Uh-huh. Well, my analogy for that, because I'm going to start a series tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, at 6:30 on critical thinking in general. My analogy to that is someone who says, I want to move fast. I want training in moving fast. I say, oh, really? How are you going to move? I said, well, I'm going to ski, I'm going to run, I'm going to swim, and I want to be fast. So train me to be fast. Sorry, skiing and swimming don't have a lot in common in terms of moving fast. So, there isn't one thing called training in being fast. There's training in being a fast swimmer and there's training in being a fast skier. They're two different skills. Yeah, but I just want to think logically. I want to think things through. Aha, that's what you want. Well, what would you say to a person who said this? Science is the way you discover the truth. And science has a method. So thinking things through means following the scientific method. Okay, and what's the scientific method? Well, first of all, you look around at the world and see kinds of things that happen. And then you try to explain why they happen. And usually you try to explain it with some kind of theory. And then you have to test and see whether the theory is true or not. So you make a prediction and you do an experiment to see if the prediction comes true. And if it comes true, you count yourself on the right track, and then you do another experiment. And if it falls, then you go back and you change the theory to fit the new facts. And that's how you arrive at the truth of the world. That's the way of thinking critically and arriving at the truth. So I've actually met people like this. So I say to them, let me tell you something. Let me ask you something. In your scientific investigations, do you use mathematics? Yeah, of course, Rabbi. What do you think? Of course we use mathematics. Well, where do you get your math from? From the math book, Rabbi. Uh-huh. And the author, where did he get the math from? Did he observe the world and see what happens and then try to explain it and cook up a theory to explain it and then deduce consequences and do an experiment to do an observation? Is that how he got the math? Not really. You see, he thought, there are prime numbers. I wonder, bigger and bigger. I wonder if they ever end or they don't end. I got to think about that. Oh, let's see, if I used factorials, and if I used the fact that every number, when it's a factorial plus 1, can't be divided by any of the numbers in the factorial, and then if this one isn't a prime, then if it isn't a prime, then it's divisible by lower numbers, and then you come down to the fact, aha, guess what? There's an infinity of factorials. That's how you get proofs in math. Not using what you call the scientific method at all. Nothing like it. Well, then how do you get to the truth about the world? And now, let's see, are chemistry and astronomy really the same method? In chemistry, you can do experiments. You can't do experiments in astronomy. And then, astronomy, you can do observations. What about history? In history, the event took place 300 years ago. It's not going to happen again. And you can't observe it at all. So, how do you get to be sharp and logical? You learn chemistry, and you learn astronomy, and you learn math, and you learn other disciplines, and you try your hand, and you face certain problems and difficulties, and you make mistakes, and you correct the mistakes. There's no short method. There's no such thing as being logical, or learning logic, or learning critical thinking. Critical thinking varies from subject to subject. So you have to dive in and work with the material. My field of research was philosophy and mathematics. When I first learned Gemara, I was terribly disoriented because the methodology in philosophy and mathematics is utterly, utterly different from Gemara. And I didn't know the Gemara methodology, and it was very tough. I had to struggle to learn a new way of thinking about things. One of the teachers we had, I was in the Boston area, was Shlomo Sternberg, who was a professor of math at Harvard, also from Guy. I was in a Gemara shir with him, learning the Doran, and he mentioned Isa Hefza and Isa Gavra, the prohibition that attaches to an object and prohibition that applies to a person. And I said to him, how do you define those terms? And he said, we don't, just kept going. I thought, what? Wait a minute. you don't define them, then you don't know what you're talking about. So then your whole discussion is incompetent. Well, no, it isn't actually. The desire for definitions is usually a mistake, as a matter of fact. But I didn't know that, because in math, you start with definitions, and you start with axioms, and you prove things. But Gemara is not like that. It's just a different discipline. So the idea of being logical isn't an idea that has a useful content. There's just certain types of problems, certain types of things you want to analyze, certain types of arguments that you have to consider, and try to avoid the fallacies and to get things straight. The more experience you have, and the wider a set of problems you consider, the more flexible you'll become. And that, I don't know if any. It's sort of like learning to swim. You don't swim from reading a book. You have to swim from getting in the water. So here too, you just got to get in the water and swim. And I'll be doing that over the next few weeks. At the 6:30 year, just picking up some of the things that are very useful, and ones that apply to religious type of subjects as well. And hopefully that'll be a useful introduction for people. Yeah.
When one goes out into the work world, what amount of religious study should one try and do per day?
Everybody's different. Not only is everybody different, but every age is different, and the responsibilities you have at the time are different. There's no one formula for everybody. And especially if you're going to the work world, my advice, pretty generally, maybe there are cases where it doesn't work, and I'm not aware of them, but pretty generally, my advice is you want to get ahead in the workplace. Number one, your job is to make your direct employer a success. That's your job. To make him a success. Then you're useful to him. And number two, don't just do what you're told, but think outside the box. And at least come with suggestions or questions. I noticed that we do this way and that way, and I'm wondering why it is that we do it that way. So show an interest in more than simply following the instructions that you've been given. When you do that, and then you show your ability to understand the answers and to identify with the answers, then when somebody's out with a broken leg for a month and needs somebody to fill in, you say, okay, look, he cares and he thinks about things, and so he could be. My son works for the Eder Charedis in Kashrus, and he told me a story about two people who were hired, and one got a promotion, the other one didn't. They're hired at the same time, so the one who didn't get asked his boss, how come he got a promotion, I didn't? He said, I'll show you why. Come with me. They went to some place or other where people were assembled, and there was a guy there with a package. He says, go over and find out what the guy has in his package. Comes back. And find out, where did he get it? Come back. What price did he pay for it? Come back. Where's he going with it? Come back. How long is it going to take him to get there? Come back. Who does he work for? Come back. He says, okay, you did a good job. Now watch. Takes the other guy and he says, see the guy with the package over there? Go over and find out what he has in the package. He goes over and he comes back and he says, this is what he has, this is where he got it, this is where he's going to, this is what he paid for it, this is where he's going, and what time it's going to. I didn't have to tell him to ask each question. He understood that I wanted information about the package. So he himself asked all the possible relevant questions and brought back all the information. He went beyond what I told him to do. And he went beyond in an intelligent way. That's what you want. You want somebody who, when you give him an assignment, very often things happen that you didn't expect. How are you going to deal with them? Well, if you're the kind of person who tries to check things out beforehand in the widest possible way, show this kind of interest. Interest means you're showing loyalty. You're showing that you care about the success of not just earning your living by doing what you were told, but you're interested in the success of the project, right? If you establish these kinds of relationships with people, that would be a way for you to I would even sometimes say, take on extra responsibility for nothing. Simply say, I see that this would help, or hand it in and say, look, I saw that this would help, so I did this. Something has to make you stand out above and beyond everybody else when it comes for a promotion. If you do that, you have a chance of being the one that they'll want to push in. Again, not the Sheller, who's been running this institution for 40 years, said there are two attitudes towards hiring. One is, I have a slot, I need somebody to do the job, and find the person who will be the best person to do the job. And the other is, hire talented people and let them find their own slots. let them create their own slots. He said, now it's causes a certain amount of tension because they want to do their own thing, and they don't always want to do what you want them to do, but in the long run, it's worth it. So, that's some advice about how to make it in the workplace. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.